Welcome to another episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. You know, we hear a lot about DAs and state prosecutors, state's attorneys who don't really want to punish people anymore when they do wrong. Nowhere was this better pointed out than an article by our next guest, Adam Coleman. He calls himself the President of Aintblackistan. He is next.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
So I live in Minnesota, and there is a Hennepin County District Attorney named Mary Moriarty who was called out by our next guest because she has shown leniency to murderers, particularly teenagers who have committed murder, not accidental murder, just murder, and has decided that the data suggests that we shouldn't incarcerate them because too many of them are already incarcerated. So sorry, victim. I'm going to let this guy go. Adam B. Coleman, who calls himself the President of Aintblackistan. He is black, you'll see in a moment, but he does not go along with all the typical narratives that you would see from people who like to generalize people like Adam. And he is the founder of WrongSpeak, speaking wrong at the right time. He's just grown and grown. We had him on earlier in the early days of this podcast, and we're happy to have him back to talk about this story in Minnesota and some others. And he brings such a wonderful perspective. If you hadn't heard him before, you're going to really enjoy Adam now. But first, I want to ask you if you're losing your hair. I think right now we're all losing our hair, or maybe it just feels like our hair is on fire. But if you're one of those millions of Americans, whether you're male or female, no matter what your age is, and you are noticing premature hair loss, and you're thinking, oh, this runs in my family, I know it's going to happen, there is a real solution that delivers on its promise without the harsh side effects, unwanted chemicals, and unpleasant smells. Thanks to our friends that develop Genucel skincare, Provia uses a safe natural ingredient called Procapil to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and loss. By supporting healthy scalp circulation, the delivery of nourishing nutrients, and healthy hair follicle anchoring to your scalp, Provia guarantees, yes, I said guarantees, more hair on your head than in the shower or in your comb. Effective for men and women of any age and safe on colored, treated, and styled hair. It's that easy. And right now, new customers save over 50% off Provia's introductory package at proviahair.com/Michele. Every package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, plus Provia 30 super concentrate for faster, more noticeable results. Provia works, guaranteed, or 100% of your money back. See results for yourself right now. I don't know why you would wait. Proviahair.com/Michele, Provia hair, all one term, .com/Michele with one L, proviahair.com/Michele. His name is Adam Coleman. On his X, formerly Twitter account, founder of WrongSpeak Publishing, author, columnist, published by the New York Post, Newsweek, Epoch Times, Federalist, Daily Mail, Post Millennial, Publica Now, just prolific in his thinking and writing. And he stood up at the right time to show courage and conviction of his own beliefs in spite of what other people were saying. I love this kid. I call him a kid because he's younger than me. Anyone younger than me is a kid. Adam B. Coleman, President of Aintblackistan, is next. Adam B. Coleman, thanks for joining us again. It's so good to have you on. I teased this piece that you wrote for the New York Post. People see what they want to see, which means they choose to ignore what is inconvenient to their worldview. You talk here about a story regarding the district attorney of Hennepin County, which is Minneapolis, basically, Mary Moriarty. What drew you to this story?
I think what drew me to the story was I typically look for articles that talk about power dynamics between government and regular people, or when innocent people aren't being listened to. You know, when there's a victim, like a real victim, not fake victims, but real victims of something that is obviously bad, are being overlooked, overshadowed. And especially when it's done by people who have authority. those are the type of articles that I'm attracted to, because I don't think they're highlighted enough. There's a lot of shiny news stories that are out there, that are very sensational, but I think it means a lot to talk about, like, hey, it's not right that this person who's supposed to be representing the victims, right, and along with that, the families of the victims, and they're basically completely disregarding it because of their ideology and what their specific agenda of looking out for teenage convictions and getting that down. What their first priority is supposed to be: are they representing the victims appropriately? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think victims are being necessarily represented appropriately. Let me continue to read from your article, and we'll just go from there. In Minnesota, Hennepin County District Attorney Mary Moriarty is facing stark criticism from victims and family members of victims in the greater Minneapolis area for her policy positions that give disproportionate leniency to rapists, pedophiles, and murderers, despite her previous promise to, quote, deliver more safety and more justice. Well, I guess the question would be justice for whom, safety for whom. This one woman, Catherine Markey, her son was murdered during a carjacking in 2019. And she recalls how she was told moments before a plea hearing that the DA was only seeking probation and not jail time for one of the teenagers involved in his death. And the mom lamented, quote, it is a trend, definitely, because of Mary Moriarty. She is playing public defender. The only thing is that's not her role anymore. What did you take away from that statement from the mom of this murdered young man?
I thought it was a very interesting statement for her to say that she's basically the district attorney is going in there attempting to play both sides, right? And rather than focusing on, is she representing the victims appropriately? Like, if they're bringing charges to someone, that means they already did their due diligence to say that this person is worth convicting, right? So that means that they're approaching something of justice, something that is already fair from that point. From that point on, once you bring charges, your advocacy for the defendant isn't there anymore. Your advocacy is supposed to be for the person who was harmed, right, in this case. And also, because that person is no longer here, the family members, right, of the person who was harmed. So I think it's very telling of what she is saying, because I think based off of what I've been learning, that's what it sounds like to me.
There's another mom, Sharice Bennett, felt a similar shock in reaction to Moriarty's leniency when she was informed that the teen who murdered her son, Daryl Freeman, wouldn't face any prison time. Let me repeat that. The teen who murdered her son wouldn't face any prison time. I couldn't breathe, Sharice moaned. I said, I just got to get up out of here. I would never have imagined in a million years that it would have went that way. However, despite the disappointment coming from the victims and the victims' loved ones, Moriarty remains rigid in her philosophical approach to minimizing the number of young offenders who are incarcerated. So she's got this approach, if I'm reading this right, Adam, of I just want to keep young men out of prison. Is that fair?
I mean, basically. And listen, it's not to say that is a necessarily bad thing when they're, like, for example, like drug convictions.
Yes.
Sometimes I think we over punish for drug convictions.
Agreed.
For someone who's possessing, maybe there should be more leniency for that in exchange for rehab, things like that. Right. But when you're talking about like the most heinous of crimes, like murder, the advocacy shouldn't be as strong, in my opinion. Right. If anything, it should remain considerably harsh when it comes to something like the loss of someone's life and being responsible for it. So I don't understand the basically the one size fits all approach to saving each child who is, maybe they grew up in a broken home, maybe they're affiliated with some gang from a young age, and they turned out and got into this mess. Well, I mean, that's not your fault. I mean, at the end of the day, they're still involved in a murder.
Yeah.
and they should be punished adequately.
I couldn't agree more. And Moriarty, this DA in question, says, quote, "I think it takes a lot of courage, actually, to act upon what you say you're going to do. I knew we would get a lot of pushback, but if you're truly going to make change, if you truly care about your values and you want to have integrity and you believe in research and look at the data, these are the right decisions and I stand by them." I'm not sure what research and data she is talking about, but the term data, Adam, gets used as sort of a weapon here, in a kind of a way people hide behind data that is often manipulated for the purposes of the people researching or putting that data together. I could find any statistician, any research analysis that could counter her data just by manipulating the numbers or something. So she's calling on data and research rather than the fact that a young man was murdered, and saying,
Right.
you know, I'm truly going to make change by letting these kids go free. What does this accomplish?
What does it accomplish? Nothing that we want, nothing that a normal person would want. This accomplishes her objective to be a good savior of children, especially Black children. And if that means that you kind of, dust your hands and say, you know what, don't do it again, and just let them, get out of jail free card, with probation while being involved in a murder, then so be it. I mean, like you said, you can use numbers to validate anything that you want. Yeah, I've seen racists use numbers to validate their hatred of somebody. You see it all over the place. There are valid ways to use data in an analytical, non-biased way. And then there are ways that you can manipulate and validate whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Well, it seems as though through the legal system, she's trying to achieve some sort of vague form of justice rather than look at a case-by-case basis and say, you know what, young man, you murdered another man. You're going to jail. No matter if she's just going to lump that criminal in with all the numbers that you and I just referenced in terms of, over punishment of drug possession and the like. And she's going to just say, well, we've got it. We can't have these kids going to prison. But he murdered someone. And you're leaving a mom going, what? It's progressive. Here, I'm going to read from you again. What Moriarty is showing the public is that her tears are no match for her hubris, and that the injustice they may experience is a feature, not a bug. Progressive ideologues like Moriarty believe that every system, especially the criminal justice system, is fundamentally flawed, and the only way to course correct is to radically shift the direction of society's boat, even if it means some may fall overboard. Yes, this course correction has kind of flipped everything upside down. Rather than, again, case-by-case basis, it seems to me we've just said, you know what? Let's throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over from this completely backwards place. It concerns me. It confuses me. But more than that, it concerns me. What do you see as the counter to this? Do you think that people are starting to wake up to these ideologues?
Yeah. I'm one of these people, especially the longer I've been doing this and writing about it and looking at things. And then on top of it, going outside and just remembering like growing up and being around different people. I've lived in different states, different jobs, been around people of all different backgrounds. And generally speaking, no one really acts the way that either the media is trying to perpetuate or that these particular ideologues feel about society. Like, it's rare to find someone who actually is like this. And it's even rare to find someone who wants to put it in practice. Is it more now than it was before? Probably, because now it's in the lexicon as far as, talking about white supremacy and all these different things. These weren't phrases that regular people used. But I still believe that most people don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care about the ideology. They don't care about progressivism. They don't believe in these things. They know that there's two genders. They're like these are insane concepts to most people who and they just roll their eyes because they have bigger problems, right? And my issue is that when these people and they generally are attracted to positions of power because their objective is to change society. You can only change society if you have power to do so. So when they get in these positions of power, they inflict what they believe on everybody else because their objective is to change, no matter how many people you piss off, because they'll say stuff like change is difficult, right? Meaning change is difficult for you, right? And you're going to be uncomfortable when I start changing things, but that's what needs to be done. That is their mentality, is to do things at any means necessary. It doesn't matter if I steamroll you. It doesn't matter if I hurt anybody in the process. They'll get over it. Change needs to happen. And that is the dangerous part, because for many of these people, and I don't know this DA personally, but they probably are well-intentioned people. I think most of these people are actually well-intentioned. But the problem is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yes.
So I think that is what we're facing.
Listen, we can't ignore the times we're living in. And we're in kind of this 2 weeks out now from October 7th, the awful day in Israel. And you're seeing groups now, large groups, and they continue to grow, Adam, which is now kind of alarming to me. And these are groups protesting on behalf of Palestine, but they say, I support Hamas because this is what's needed in order to right an ancient wrong. You could call it ancient, you could call it, an ongoing wrong, whatever you want to call it. But to support terrorism, this is kind of the same thing you're talking about. Like, I am going to go so far to the extreme to make a change that I'm going to ignore history. I'm going to ignore that there have been negotiations. I'm going to ignore the fact that Hamas is funded by Iran. I'm going to ignore all the atrocities and say, if this is what we have to do to right a wrong, I think we should do it. How are you looking at what's going on right now, and also seeing that Black Lives Matter in Chicago anyway is supporting this effort by these terrorists in Gaza?
Well, I mean, it's a very sensitive topic. I tend not to talk about it too much because if I'm completely honest, what it reminds me of is 2020. It reminds me of the BLM 2020 moment, where there were a number of Black people who were on edge because of George Floyd. And so when someone asks a rational question about something, everybody became, well, you must be a racist. I was like, no, I'm not a racist. I'm just asking a particular question. I don't know these things. Why aren't you wearing this? Why don't you have the BLM flag? Why aren't you showing this? Why isn't your avatar Black, right? And then it becomes like this whole social pressure to do certain things, when most people just say, like, I think killing innocent people is a bad thing, no matter who's being killed. Like, that's basically my stance on just about everything here. And supporting anybody who thinks it's a good and sound strategy to target innocent people, right? Not accidental casualties of war, right? But to specifically target and maim and rape and kidnap innocent people. I think that is a bad thing, and I don't think you should support that, right? Especially that's not a because we could talk about the American military, and we could talk about like offshoots of someone in some sector that did something that they weren't supposed to do.
Right.
But those people, they get court-martialed, right? But this is something that was a planned attack. They specifically wanted to do this. This was part of their terror campaign, right? So it can't be, this isn't like something on the fringe. Right. This was the plan. Yeah. This was the objective. Yeah. And if I see that, I cannot support that, right? Now, as far as Palestinians go, one of my old friends from my childhood is a Palestinian, got to know his family. And that was actually my first exposure to people from the Middle East was through his family. And I got to understand a little bit better as far as like how emotional it could be. Quick funny story. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then.
Okay.
I was younger and I didn't understand like Palestine, and I didn't understand that stuff. I would confuse Palestine and Pakistan. And I remember being at his house with him and his like three brothers. And I was like, oh, like Israel. And they all stopped and looked at me and they said Palestine. And I was like, oh, okay. Like they're dead serious about this. So like, I get how emotional it can be, and how serious it is for a lot of people. But I think there should be a distinction between Palestinians and Hamas.
Yes.
And I see also, and one thing that disturbs me is I see people say Hamas wins in their elections overwhelmingly. Now, that to me, that's like saying Saddam Hussein wins elections overwhelmingly. Like, okay, but who else is running?
Yeah.
I mean, is it like, are they strong arming everybody?
Yeah.
Is that the only option that exists? I have no idea.
Right.
I'm not even saying that I do, but I don't know. But
Right.
that's what it feels like to me when people try to use that as a validation as to why. So they voted for Hamas. They support Hamas. So F them. We don't care if innocent people die. I don't think that's good either.
These are really troubling times, and I know that you are navigating them like everybody else, and you're so thoughtful, which is what I appreciate about you. But as we sit here today in the autumn, the final quarter of 2023, I like to ask this question. What makes you hopeful, Adam? Is there anything that you're seeing out there in the world that brings you hope?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're sitting here, we're having conversations about it, we're actively doing stuff. I meet people all the time who were, I like to say, like activated in 2020 because they saw something was wrong in society and they decided to do something about it, just like I did. So it's people like myself and yourself and others who said, you know what, my life is fine, but I want to do something else, something that I feel would be more beneficial. I want to try and help. I want to get into some sort of activism. I just see it. I see that as a very, very positive thing, especially because they didn't have to. Like I had an IT career. I didn't have to do any of this stuff, but I felt compelled to do something, to say something, and now I'm sitting here with you. So I'm very optimistic for the future, and I get even more optimistic when I get responses from regular people who are unable to say something, but they appreciate that I am saying something. And that tells me everything right there, that the voices of regular people are being stifled. It wasn't just my voice that felt stifled during 2020, during the BLM riots. As a Black American who didn't agree with the BLM movement, who didn't agree with all this stuff, didn't like it that people were burning buildings down and terrorizing others in the name of Blackness. I didn't like that. But I also wanted to, use my voice to do the right thing, to say my piece. And what I've just basically found was that saying my piece is actually what a lot of people really want to say too. They just don't have the ability to. So like how you were reading that article from the New York Post, I don't take for granted every single article that I've written for the New York Post. I literally go and get the newspaper every time. So we save it in a scrapbook because you never know when the last article will be, and give it to my son. But I'm very proud to do that. And I've written touching articles where people contact me, say, thank you so much for saying that. And, they tell me their stories, and it really means a lot. For someone to actually have a voice of the common man and have a platform like the New York Post to say it.
Yeah, your platform continues to grow, and I'm such a fan of yours, and I feel like we do connect on that feeling of wanting to do something, wanting to help bridge the divide. Really, it's because I do think we all have far more in common than we have, than we would think right now, given the way of the world. How fulfilled do you feel by this change in your life, by this this big step that you've taken, because I'm sure as much as you get the wonderful comments and the warm responses and the appreciative support that you clearly get, there's got to be some pushback. And I just want to get your net. How's it going for you?
Overwhelmingly positive.
Oh, good.
I want to say 98% positive.
Oh, good.
And the negative, I tend not to see. Like, I don't scroll through comments. And stuff
I don't
like
either.
That. I've learned, especially about the human brain, is that you can get 100 praises, but if you see that one negative, that sticks in your head.
Ain't that the truth?
So I tend not to seek it out.
Right.
But like sometimes, like someone will send me like a negative DM, and I'll just I'll take that and I'll reply with some humor to it.
Yes.
And then I'll showcase my humor to everybody else. Like, look, I got fan mail, So it really doesn't even bother me.
Yeah.
It's very few and far between that I get negative messages. Part of the reason is because I'm not very controversial. I don't antagonize people. I say how I feel about things, but I'm very considerate as to what words I use, how I use those words. And I think that the energy that you put out is the energy you get back. And so because I don't put out negative energy, I generally don't get negative energy back. And when someone does give me negative energy, I have an audience to say like, yo, look at this person. I don't know why they're coming at me like that.
Yeah.
And they look crazy.
Yeah.
And I look fine. So, I will say that it feels great to have some sort of impact and help people. WrongSpeak Publishing is growing. I now have a staff of people, and I'm continuously growing. We're now getting into book publishing. We got into journalism this year, and it's something that I didn't foresee. WrongSpeak started as a blogging platform for me to complain about stuff.
Right.
But then it's expanded to a place for other people. We have guest posts, we have columnists, we have journalism. And we just launched our first book outside of my book, and it's a fictional book, but it talks about the media and the impact on society, kind of George Orwell kind of sounding.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for the future.
I am excited for you. I just think that as your community, as your platform continues to grow, I think it encourages and inspires more people to stick to their values, to not waver, to be strong, and to be able to say some things that they might not have been totally courageous enough to say maybe 3-4 years ago. So I applaud you. And you're not controversial, Adam. And you are funny, by the way. I've seen some of your retweets of people's things, and they send you, and it's fabulous. And I often retweet them because I think this is the way that you handle it. That's lighthearted, that's funny, that's not malicious. But it does point out someone's craziness, and rightfully so, because if they are going to call you something or suggest you don't know what you're talking about or anything like that, they deserve to be called out themselves. But rather than being malicious about it, you do it in a very light and fun way. And I think I just hope that spreads. I really do. And I'm happy to know you and happy to promote your stuff in any small way that I can.
Thank you. No, and I really do appreciate it. And one of these days I'm going to make it back out to Minneapolis.
And we will sit down together.
We'll connect this time.
Absolutely.
Of course, the one time I come to Minneapolis, you had to leave. But.
I know. I find that happens more often than I wish, but with family all over the country, it tends to happen. But next time you come out here, we will sit down. He is Adam Coleman, and he is the president of Aintblackistan, which I just think is one of the most clever and wonderful things I've ever seen. Adam, thanks again. And folks, check him out. We have posted here for you all the places you can find Adam, and like him, be brave and do good. And we'll see if things shake out for the better. See you next time.